Welcome to Glory Revealed, where we talk about how suffering and trials can bring glory and good. In this podcast, we will dig deep into painful life happenings and uncover the beauty that often unfolds when you surrender yourself to learn, to grow, and to become the person who God desires for you to be. Just because you are suffering doesn't mean it won't be used for good. And that is what we will talk about here on Glory Revealed. Today, let's welcome my dear friend and longtime business advocate, Stephanie, better known as Honey Holden on Instagram. Stephanie has just such a beautiful Glory Revealed story to share with us. I think you guys will really, really love it. If you want to find her on Instagram, it's at Honey Holden, and she has a special on our Substack where she answers some additional questions and shares some past pictures of her family that I think you guys are going to love. That is Amy Mariflora at Substack. Let's get to it, and I can't wait for you to hear what Stephanie has to say. Okay, well, today on Glory Revealed Musings, we have Stephanie Holden, who is better known as Honey. And she is one of my favorites. I met Stephanie, I think we met, I don't even know how early on in my Evie's Tree years did I meet you, but pretty early on. Like
it was in the very beginning.
Very early years. And you were an Instagram personality, so to speak, or, you know, you had an Instagram page that had this, just everything about you screamed happy, and it made me feel like, yes, I need to like connect with that person. And you have such a colorful way about yourself, you know, everything about you with your clothes and your hair and your jewelry and everything was always so fun. And so whenever you would put on our hoodies, I would get so happy. I would just always feel like yes, these are great photos. And we would use your photos. You know, you were at the time in the beginning of Evie's Tree, which I guess is kind of like this now, but not like it was 10 years ago, you know, 12, 13 years ago, where, you know, Instagram it didn't have, you know, the algorithm. And so like we had such a great connection and reach with all of our people that were on, you know, our followers. And so you really helped build Evie's Tree from the beginning with your, you know, you always were so kind and you looked so great in our hoodies, and a lot of your followers became our followers. So thank you for that. And, but as I got to know you, I realized you are much more than your hair and your clothes and your earrings, and you have such a beautiful story. And I loved the story then, and even now as I've gone through what I've gone through, I love the story even more. And, you know, the whole purpose of Glory Revealed Musings is to talk about how, you know, it's all centered around Romans 8, where the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that's going to be revealed to us, right? So this whole concept and idea of you go through really tough times, and, you know, you can call them bumps in the road, you can call them valleys, you can call them whatever, but you go through stuff, and, you know, when you're going through it, you feel like it could be possibly the worst thing that ever happened to you. Like, I'm never going to make it through this. You know, we've all been there. We have these super dark moments where we feel like I'm not going to get out of this. Like, this is, I'm stuck. And I think when I was going through my really dark time, that verse was like, I became obsessed with it because I felt like, okay, there is going to be a glory that's going to be better. It's going to be, it's not going to even compare with the suffering that I went through. And it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be better if I can just manage to keep, like, get up every day and walk. And that was like, that verse really kept me motivated. Like, okay, I'm just going to keep getting up because I know the glory is coming. And so I really held on to that, and that got me through a lot of really, really dark times. And now, you know, I'm not fully on the other side, but I'm getting there on the other side. And it's like the joy is back, and the excitement for my life is back, and everything about it is really wonderful and beautiful. And I know there's more to come, but I am trying. The whole point of these Glory Revealed musings is to talk to people who have been through hard times, been through moments where they thought they weren't going to make it, and they are on the other side. And not to say that you still don't go through hard times. I mean, that is part of the journey, right? As we go through suffering. But you went through your story, your and Nick's story, when you were younger, and you really could have quit, and but you didn't, and you're on the other side, and you have this beautiful Glory Revealed story to share. So I'm really hoping today, just the next few minutes, we can I want to hear about your story. I want you to tell people how what happened with you and Nick, and then give us like a little bit of where you are now and what God has done in your life, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
start with you and Nick. You guys were high school sweethearts. Start there.
We were 15 when we started dating in high school. And when we were 16, just, a year later, I became pregnant. And we were very involved in high school. Nick played sports. He was being scouted. We were very much part of we love school.
You were I imagine you guys were
No,
like the it couple.
no, I would not say that, but we were friends with everyone, and we just, then I find myself pregnant in our junior year, and the year that our team went to state. We're from Louisiana. We actually went to state, and Nick played ball in the Superdome, which was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
I was in chorus and sung with an ensemble of 4 parts, and I got to sing the national anthem. And so it was in the Superdome, which was really cool. And
That's amazing.
yeah, and then looking back, Elizabeth, our daughter, our oldest daughter, was actually with us at that game. We didn't realize it. I didn't know that I was pregnant at that point, but I was. So it was really, it was a devastating blow for our families. And it was really hard. He went back his senior year of high school, married, and then we had Elizabeth like 3 weeks into our senior year.
And you didn't go back.
I didn't go back. I got my GED, which was not like part of the plan for me, and I stayed home and raised her, and he finished out school, and so the odds were stacked against us. I don't think anybody expected us to make it. We were this sweet little couple, and I think everybody was like, they're going to give it a shot. But there never really has been a time where neither one of us, we've talked about it, where we doubted that we weren't going to make it. I mean, things were hard. There was a lot of hard things that we had to go through, but it was never like a time where
you just knew you were meant.
Yes, we just knew. And I was brought up in church. I was raised in church. I had all of the knowledge. Everyone would have thought that I knew the Lord. I would have told you at the time that I did, but it wasn't until 10 years later that I really, it's when he became personal to me, and he became my savior and everything. So it was like this disconnect. I had all the knowledge, but it wasn't in my heart. So when all this took place, we didn't have like the power of the Holy Spirit like living within us. He was not a factor in any of our decisions, but we can look back and see him in all of it, how he just, it was the prayers of my mom. She knew the Lord, was living for the Lord, and I believe in prayer, and that why it's so important to be praying for our kids and our grandkids, even when they're like out there making choices that, God's not anywhere near them.
Yeah.
But to just be praying, because God honors those prayers. And we can look back and see how he was doing that in our lives when we didn't ever like the choices that we were making in our life. We didn't like pray. We didn't even think, is this something God would want for us? We were just doing it. But God, in his graciousness and his love and his plan, he had a plan for our life. He was just he was always before us, going before us and protecting us. Just all of these things, we can see how he was at work. And then it
That
all
is
came
so incredible.
together. Yes.
Because you've been together. So how long have you been together now?
This August, so in just a few months, it'll be 36 years that we've been
Wow.
married. 36.
Wow.
And I honestly can say, I mean, we love each other more now than we did in the beginning. I mean, just
Yeah.
the love is different, it's deeper, but it's even more fun. Like we just love being together. We're together 24/7. I mean,
Yes. Yes.
literally, and he's my favorite person. So
Well,
I
I think
just,
I said to you on the phone when we were talking last week that, there are some people that just mesh, right? So you were
yeah,
a good match probably from the get go, which really helped you. It worked for you. And
yes,
so,
yeah.
like your personalities matched and everything. But I think my question for you was when you found out you were pregnant and you were a high school, you were so young. I mean, you're the same age as my kids, like so young. And what did that look like? How did you feel? And how, I mean, I think in piggybacking on that, how about your mom? Like what, do you know what I mean? Like, what was the landscape like for you emotionally at that point?
Ooh, well, we kept it a secret. Like, I don't know what we thought we were gonna like. It was inevitable that it was, but we kept it a secret for the longest time. Like us trying to figure out what we were gonna do.
Do you think that was
Uh,
because you were embarrassed or?
it was. I don't know what. It wasn't that we were embarrassed. We just. I think we were so. Both of us did not want to disappoint our families.
Mm,
Nick, like I said, was being scouted to play ball to go to college somewhere. My mom had already been through so much. She had just
yeah,
lost my dad just a few years before. One of my brothers was deep in a drug addiction that she was having to deal with on her own at that time, who is now delivered from that and as a pastor. Just God, that's a whole nother story. That's just
your stories
incredible.
are incredible because
But
it's
at the
like God did
time,
so much.
he really did. He just kind of swept through our family and just changed us, transformed our family. But at the time, I just was like, gosh, I'm gonna have to disappoint her. I mean, like that's kind of how I felt. Like I didn't want to cause more pain because she was
Yeah.
already going through so much, and she and I have always been so close. Um, so I don't know why, but I mean, I was literally almost 5 months pregnant. I was like a little over 4.5 months before we told our parents. I don't know how I was
Oh,
able to keep it.
wow.
It was
So
just
how
like,
did they,
yeah.
like, you must have not been showing or,
I no, I mean, unbelievably, I didn't. I mean, it's like as soon as we told, it was like, poof, everything just popped out. Um, but we managed to kind of keep it a secret. Trying to figure things out, what we were going to do. And we had a few, even a teacher, like, because there were a few like key people that we had shared with, just a very few that kind of knew, like maybe a couple of weeks before we told our parents. And, abortion was tossed around from like friends and even a teacher that had heard come and suggested it, like was encouraging that. And that was never really an option for either one of us. We just were trying to figure out what we were, how we were going to make this work. So we finally did share it with our parents, and they were supportive from the get go. His family and my mom, and so we've always had that. We've had support, and they didn't like y'all have to get married or anything like that. They were just like, we're here for y'all. But it was like 3 weeks before she was born. We were like, this is crazy. We love each other. We know it's dumb. We know we're young and dumb, but we
yeah.
want to be married. And
So 3 weeks before, that's right. So I saw your wedding photos and you were pretty pregnant. So was three
yes,
weeks before you had her, then you guys decided to get married.
yes, 3 weeks.
Wow.
And,
I
and
mean, I guess my thought is like, how did you, you know, I don't know. I just think about my kids and And maybe the beauty and the blessing of all this is that you were so young, because maybe there is that whole frontal lobe absence there where you don't forward think that well. Do you know what I mean? So maybe it
Yes.
was just, maybe that's the blessing in it. But I can imagine, like, especially your parents, like how scared they must have felt, how worried. I mean, there had to have been a bit of a darkness involved in this where you were like, wow, like, you get that heavy feeling when things are not, you're not certain, and there had to have been a lot of that for you. Like, just, what am I going to do?
Well, I mean, like I said, we had already experienced a lot of that. My dad was 43 when he died,
Yeah.
of a heart attack. And so my mom was only 39 when he
Oh,
passed away. And so
yeah.
we had already kind of been introduced to the
Some darkness.
unknowns of life. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do now? And we had seen how God was faithful. He had
Yeah.
been faithfully bringing us through. Um, More so, I looked back I just, at that season of my life, I was always kind of piggybacking on my mom's faith because I didn't really have faith of my own yet.
Yeah.
Just watching her go through a lot of that she went through. And anybody that knows my mom, she is literally one of the most joyful people you will ever meet on the
Mm-hmm.
planet. She's
Mm-hmm.
just full of joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned a lot about trusting the Lord and knowing that whatever darkness that you're going through at the time, if you trust
Mm-hmm.
Him, you're going to come out more like Him,
Yeah.
closer to Him. In
Yeah.
fact, probably 6 or 7 years ago, she went through something really devastating, very hard. And I called her, not even knowing we live 6 hours apart.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
I had to call her. I couldn't go and just be with her, and just unsure of what I was going to even, how would I comfort her? What would I say to her? And she in turn comforted me when I called, and she's like, Stephanie, I don't know why this has happened. I don't like it. In fact, I hate it. But the one thing that I do know is that I'm going to come through this knowing Jesus in a way that I didn't know him before. And for that, I'm
So,
actually thankful and looking forward to it. And I'm
yes.
like, you
Yes.
know, what?
That's what I was just going to say, is that it's interesting because, the darkness that time that I went through, where it was really dark. I just was really unsure. I mean, there were moments where I just really barely could get out of bed. I had to force myself to get out of bed. It was so hard. And I felt like I was in a fog. But because I started to gradually see the light, it's like now when tough stuff comes, I'm like, this is hard. This is miserable, but I'm going to get through it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, you kind of start seeing, like, that's the beautiful part about this whole glory revealed thing, is that once you have a huge traumatic situation where the glory is revealed in your life, it's like the other things, they still are hard. They're always hard, but when you connect that God is walking through that with you and that He's going to get you out, when you finally make that connection, everything seems easier, like everything that you go through seems easier. So I wanted to say, so speaking about your faith, so you marry Nick, he graduates from high school, and then he goes into the service. So, like, tell me a little bit about when did you start connecting? Because now Nick is a pastor. I don't know if we said that, but Nick and Stephanie are pastors. So they pastor a church. Remind me the name of the town. I always forget.
It's in Porterville. I'm sorry, my phone is dinging. We had technical difficulties,
That's
and now I'm
okay.
afraid to turn
No,
that.
no, I'm
Yeah.
getting dinging too, so it's not a big deal.
Okay.
But so you're in Porterville, and you are pastoring a church, and so you get married your senior year. How long did it take you to get to that point where you were walking with God? Like you were living
It was
for
10
Him.
years into, not quite 10 years. I think it was like 8 years into our marriage. It was actually Nick's mom. She came to know the Lord somewhere along the lines, about that time. The Lord interrupted her life, changed her life, and that was the first time I had seen someone so dramatically transformed. And it was like in my face, you're not like that. Like, she talked
Yeah,
about Jesus like he was her best friend, a
right.
real person that she talks to every day. And I knew a lot about him. I could tell you every Bible story that there was, but I didn't have that personal relationship like that. And it bothered me. She came home for Thanksgiving that year, and it was like, whoo, this Jesus, like, she needs to calm down. Like, it was that kind of thing. It was almost, ugh. But even though I was so, like, she needs to chill, I knew that I didn't have that. So it constantly played. I was constantly thinking about it. Like, I knew for the first time I was confronted that perhaps I don't know Jesus. Like, I have a lot of religion maybe, but I don't have that relationship. And that was in November, and it was in May of that following year. So however many months that is, that the Lord worked in my heart. And I finally just was like, it was just, May 27th of 97 is when, and then it was in July, just a few months later, that Nick surrendered and gave his life to the Lord. And so it wasn't long after that just we submerged ourselves into the church that we connected with. And Nick came to me and he says, I feel like the Lord's calling me to preach. And I'm like, I had never heard him pray out loud. I said, he was so shy. And I'm like, there's no way. I said, do you realize you have to talk in front of people? I mean, he was so quiet. And he said, I can't explain it. I just feel like that's what is God's doing in my heart. So we all just kind of chalked it up to he's growing. He's being discipled. He's growing. So we, that's what's going on here. He couldn't possibly be really called to preach. Well, he was, and our pastor counseled him and said, you need to just come before the church and let them know this is what the Lord's doing in your heart. Get everyone praying so you can have clarity and direction. And that's what he did. And it wasn't long after that, really, I mean, just so many cool God stories that we don't have time for. But I can remember the first time that he preached at our church, which we were in a fairly large church. He was doing a lot of preaching, and people would call him to fill in at different places, but he had never preached in our church, like in front of all of our peers and all of that and friends. And I had already was like, you know what, I'm going to be sick. Like, whenever that day comes, I'm just going to have a headache. I'm not going to come. And but the day did come, and our pastor asked him to preach, and I of course went. And it was during that service and that message, I just sat there with tears in awe, because he had such authority and unction from the Holy Spirit. And I was just like, that's not my husband. That obviously this is something supernatural the Lord is doing through him. And it was so obvious this was what he was created to do. And from that day on, we have been a team. Like, before, I was constantly like, ooh, I don't think so, that kind of thing. And from that moment on, we've been side by side. And I've been his, biggest fan and supporter. And so that's how that happened. And the Lord, called us to our first church that he pastored for like 6.5 years. And we've been at our church that we're at now for 15 years. Wow. And so being a pastor's wife is just the greatest privilege. I just love it. So, yeah.
I mean, would you have ever thought, right, when you were 15, 16, that this would
No. Oh my gosh. No. We were, no. And whenever we get to go back home, and when Nick, sometimes he's preached revivals at churches in the area, or we just recently had to go home for his uncle's funeral.
Yeah, you told me about that.
Yes. Yeah. And, his high school coaches were there, and so many people. It's such a testimony, because no one back then, one, thought that we would have ever made it, that we'd still be married. And then number two, no one ever thought that, Nick would be a pastor one day, preaching the gospel. And so it's such a testimony of what God will do in a person's life, can do, will do, and does. And so we're so thankful for times like that, where we get to just, point everyone, back to the Lord, that this is him working through us. So, and in between that, he did join the Navy. I know you mentioned that, and I didn't really, we were in the Navy for almost 10 years, and that's, why we were stationed where we were, and just how the Lord just all, he's so providential. Like I said, we can always look back and see, we
Mhm.
thought we were making these plans, but it was God directing our steps, and it was him, um, putting us with the people, and where
Yeah.
moving us to where we moved. All of those things was
Yeah.
all part of what he was doing, his plan for our life. So we're just so
I
thankful.
think one of the hardest things for me is, I think there's this whole concept and idea of God allowing you to go through things and then God ordaining things, right? Like saying, this is what's going to happen, or like you have a choice and you make a choice, and
Hmm.
then this is natural consequences of your choice, right? So you kind of have, but I believe very much that those two things collide, right? So like you make a choice, it's a natural consequence, and God's like, fine, I'm going to use this and I'm going to
Right.
just blow
Nothing's
it out of the
wasted.
water. And, so for me, that through my whole situation, it's like I reconciling in my brain, God, why? Like my circumstance doesn't just affect me; it affects my kids and
Hmm.
another person, and then their immediate families, and there's like this whole line. And I think what is so beautiful about your story is that your families, and we don't have time to go into it. I wish like maybe we should do a part two, but like your families, like your everybody in your family line has been so dramatically changed. And it's not that you were necessarily the catalyst of it. I feel like maybe you were just a really big boom and a lot of booms that God was using to change your family, right? But like I think what is really hard for me, and maybe hard for somebody else who's going through something really tough, is saying this is going to be used for good. Like this will turn out okay. And this is meant to move me in a direction of surrender. And I think where people get stuck is they get angry about the situation and they don't surrender, right? Like they don't say, okay, God, I don't know what you're trying to do, but I'm just going to totally give over my life to you. I'm going to just let you do whatever it is that you're trying to do here. And I guess my point is that if you can't see what God is doing, you never can get the glory on the other side, right? Like you can never be like, this is just what you said about how God had this providential hand in everything that you guys were doing. It's a beautiful, glorious experience. And to be able to look back, you probably only get that once you surrender and say, God, like you said, when you saw him speak, that was like, okay, God, that's it. And
Yeah.
then he's like, let's off to the races with you two, and you guys have had this beautiful life. You have 3 beautiful girls. How many grandkids do you have now? Tell us a little bit about that.
We're up to 9. I don't think 2 of my girls are finished though, so it's 9 and counting grandchildren. Our oldest is 15. She'll
Okay.
be 16 in December, and then our
Okay.
youngest is 7 months. So we're enjoying that so much. This season that we're in, and just we're just beyond thankful. Like
Yeah.
when we look at our family, and not only, I mean, like one of the things that I'm so thankful for is that God early on, once he began to do a work in our heart, we began to see some things that were generational in our family.
Yes.
And we began to pray specifically that stronghold would be torn down, and that these curses would be lifted. And, and one, it was like this teenage pregnancy, like premarital sex, all of these things, we can see
Yeah.
just through generations, and on,
So,
Nick's mom, her mother. And so we began to pray for that with our girls. And we're so thankful that, they're, my girls' generation, the 3 of them, and then their kids, they were like the first that were born into. Well, Elizabeth, I mean, my kids weren't, because, like I said, they were. I think Lauren, my youngest, was 2 when I was saved. If I think
okay.
back, yeah. So, but and Elizabeth can remember like a transformation. She can remember like things changing within our
That's
home.
special.
But their kids were the first, like being born into a family that like surrendered and loved the Lord, and everything about our lives was filtered through through him and his word and what his promises are. It wasn't, there's not like, church and God life over here and then our life. It's all one big, it is our life. And so that was this generation of our grandkids is the first where that, that they're born into that. And so, that's been a treasure to
so
be able to see
special.
that and see things done differently. But before we have to go, one thing that as you were talking just a minute ago about, the God just using everything and having to filter things, like having to surrender and understand that even things that are out of our control, we do have consequences to choices that we make, but God allows things in our life for a purpose that we had nothing to do with. And so just one of the things that God has taught me in the past, I'd say 15 years, that's probably big, because it was like right around when Elizabeth, maybe a little bit longer than that, because it was when they've been married 17 years now.
Oh, wow.
Crazy. Yeah. Somewhere around there was, he taught me the principle of embracing the situation. Like I was coming to him praying for things, like always wanting him to fix it or change the situation. And he distinctly spoke to my heart, to my spirit that not all things can be changed. Not all things will be fixed. And so I am missing out on so many blessings that he wants to give me through this situation because I'm trying to get him to change it. And he spoke that word embrace into my heart, which I was thinking like embrace, like hang on, because things, there's so much change, but it was actually the definition of embrace of like willingly accept something. Like instead of like this picture,
leave your hands
like
up.
coming with open hands, just like whatever you have, Lord, I willingly accept it. And when that shifted in my heart of my prayer time, of just, the situations that I was praying about, wanting them to change, they might not change. So Lord, help me in this situation to willingly embrace, accept this. And he honored that prayer. And he began to just, nothing about these situations changed, but he changed me.
Yes.
And that makes all the difference. And that principle has kept me through. So at that time I was praying about, just an empty nest and trying to figure out a new normal, and our life felt so different. And he has used that principle of learning to embrace things through so many situations ever since. Like I can't even tell you how it has shaped and changed how I live and how I walk with joy and contentment, as a wife, as a mom, just as a human being, as a person.
100%.
Just learning to just like trust him. Like it's not about having him fix it. It's about having him fix me. And then, it makes all the difference.
Yeah. I vividly remember, my dad died in July of 2021. My marriage fell apart in October of 2021, and we spent 6 months separated. And then about 4 or 5 months, we attempted to reconnect. And then in November of 2022, on November 3rd, 3 days before our 18th wedding anniversary, that was it. And that November to 2022 to the beginning of 2023, I was like, okay, this has happened. And it was, before that, I was like fighting against what was actually going on. Like, I was like, no, we're going to figure this out. And I was striving so hard to keep my business going, to keep my marriage was clearly over, to like, I had so many things I was trying so hard to hold on to. And, I look back at my journals and I see like God had, in March of 2022, I started going back to church for the first time in like 3 or 4 years, where I hadn't, there was COVID and other things, but, I really was like, I need help, like I cannot do this on my own. And then, as I slowly, my marriage in November is over completely. And then I start kind of digging in and like, okay, like this is it. This is how it's going to be. And I really was for a long time angry about it, like I felt confused. I felt sad. But I remember writing in my journal, I was reading about the Israelites, the whole, I was never a New Testament, Old Testament person. I was always a New Testament person. Like the Old Testament was just like, I don't know, the story's long, but I started reading Genesis and Exodus, and I was following the Israelites, and I just remember clearly seeing that when they surrendered, they had the most success in their journey. And when they would fight back, everything would fall apart, And I remember writing down in my journal, surrender, really big. And it was like this big, bright light that just like blew my head apart, like, I need to stop this. I need to surrender to God completely because He's doing something. And if I can just say, God, I'm in this with you, then, it's going to be amazing. And from that moment, that is when my transformation really started. That's when I started seeing joy in my everyday. Like I started seeing healing happen. It was just this almost like fast-paced healing process that happened once I just was like, that's it, God, I'm in this with you, and I don't know what you're doing. And, I don't understand this, and I would never have picked this. And this is not anything I would ask for anybody. I'm broke. My marriage is over. My kids are really struggling. Like I don't even know if I'm going to have a place to live. Like I had so many, unknowns. But as soon as I said, I give this to you, and I took my hands off the wheel, I still have my house, my kids are okay. So I think if anybody can hear anything from this is let it be, just let it be.
That's so beautiful. That's all He wants is for us to just trust Him. He is so trustworthy, and He's so faithful. And it's just, sometimes it's just so hard. We want to, we want to see something before we take that step. And He's just saying, just take the step. I'm right here with you.
Yeah.
And He proves it over and over and over again. That's why you mentioned journaling. Journaling is so important. Or even like what I do is write things in my Bible, because you forget. We sometimes
And add the
forget little
date.
details, and then
If you
date.
can add the date, that to me was like game changer, because I was like putting dates and things, and I can go back to my Bible and see like where my journey, it was 2019. You can start seeing the little questions in my Bible that I wrote all the way till today. And it's powerful. It'll help you.
It is. And it does. And it, like when you are, because we'll go through another season, and where it's hard, and when we have these reminders, we're like, oh gosh, He did that for me then. He's going to do it again. And sometimes our own words are convicting, and helps us to lift our eyes back to Him. So
no, totally. Well, I have so much, like I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I know I said that too when I talked to you on the phone this week, but like I could just, and it's probably just my stage in life. But I guess if there's anybody else out there that, is going through difficult times, just remember that God has not walked away from you. Like this is most definitely going to be okay if you can surrender, and your life will be beautiful again. It really will.
yes.
And I guess that's just my hope is, I clung to those stories when I was, in the darkest of my times, was like knowing that like there will be light again at the end, So your story is very encouraging to me. You have so much more to offer. Maybe at some point we can do a part 2. But
I'd love to.
I'm grateful that that you're here and you're doing this. And we didn't even talk about. So I'm attempting to maybe restart a clothing company, and we'll see how it goes. It's in God's hands. Right now, there's a Kickstarter going. I am only gonna. There were so many mistakes I made last time. And not that you can fix everything in one fell swoop, but I'm attempting to do things right this time. And the way that we're going to do it right this time is it's all going to be fully funded before we start, so that everybody knows they get their product, that everything's going, the factory that I'm on board with is, they are an incredible factory, and I'm actually going to do a little FaceTime with them, and they're going to explain how they're going to get the product to us. And then, I'm hoping to repair with some customers that didn't get their product before. I'm giving some freebies to them. It's just kind of a repair journey for me. So we'll see how it goes. But one of the hoodies, as if it all works out, the point of every single piece is we will tell a glory revealed story with every single piece. So one of the styles that I made previously is called the Brilla. I have to rename my pieces because Evie's tree is gone and dead, and now I have to start over. So we are renaming the Brilla after Stephanie. We're calling it Honey, because that's really Honey Holden is her handle on Instagram. So we're renaming the Brilla. We're calling it Honey. And if this all gets off the ground, and if the Kickstarter, we have until June 20th. So for those of you who are listening and you want to see hoodies back in your life, you can pledge. Your card is not charged. You just pledge. And then your card is not charged until we're fully funded. So you're completely safe. If we hit the amount that we need to hit, we know we're go. The factory is on board, ready to go. We have everything we need to move. And so your card's not charged until then. But if you love, the hoodies, you can go and grab one of it's the Brilla is now the Honey after Honey Holden. And with each piece, once this move forward, we'll put like a little card in there like we did before. But this time we're going to make it all about Jesus, because that's really where I'm at this point. So it's all about Jesus, people. That's it. So, we'll put a little card in there, and we're going to talk about Honey's Jesus story, her glory revealed story. And I hope it encourages you. As a listener and as a consumer of maybe our new brands, I hope that what this brand stands for encourages you on a daily basis. I used to say, put a hoodie on and you'll feel like you're being hugged. What I want to say now is your hoodie is going to hug you? Yes, absolutely. But I want you to put a hoodie on and remember that you can make it through whatever you're going through, that God has got you.
Yes.
And in the end, glory will be revealed in your life. So we'll see what
I
God does.
that.
But that's where we're at. So anyway, thank you, Stephanie, for doing this, for being willing to support. I'm just grateful for you. You've been a wonderful friend, and I'm thankful. So thank you.
Oh, I love what God is doing in you and through you, and His glory is definitely being revealed, and it's a beautiful thing to behold. I'm excited about what's to come.
Me too. Well, thank you so much, and we'll try to do part 2 maybe soon. So thank you. Okay. All right, turn this off. See the little clock countdown on top?
Yeah.
Okay, so before